Hello everyone, my name is Chiquete and this is Eagle Eye, where we explore topics that affect us all video game lovers. In this episode we are going to talk about Resident Evil, the remakes and the exploitation of nostalgia. First, let's have a quick history lesson. Resident Evil was created by the talented Shinji Mikami and Tokuro Fujiwara from Capcom, the well-known Japanese game developer in 1996, and it is likely that today we remember at least one of its episodes as one of the first games that made us feel real fear when playing them. This series became iconic with its dark and realistic scenarios, high difficulty, and we will talk more about this in a moment, and its computer-generated transition scenes of the highest quality, from its second installment, which brought a cinematic horror like never before seen in a video game in 1998. To give you a better idea, Toy Story, the first film made entirely in a computer, has been released just a year ago, and for many, myself included, this was the most memorable due to its combination of graphics, its charismatic characters, and was also available for both PlayStation and Nintendo 64, unlike the first entry that only came out for PlayStation, allowing it to reach a public much wider. Thanks to the huge success of Resident Evil 2, Capcom made 20 original Resident Evil entries over 20 years, plus the remake of the first game, and in 2019 comes Resident Evil 2, the remake. When talking about remaking something that is almost legendary, the question is usually, will it match the original? And here it is important to clarify what a remake is, since some may think that a remake is simply the same as before done with new technology, and technically they are right. But for the success of a remake, one has to walk the incredibly thin line between respecting the original material and updating it. That is, taking what made the original good and translating it into its current equivalent. In short, a remake is an adaptation, not a reproduction. Having clarified that, note that the key word in the question when making a remake is match, not improve. Why? Well, in order to explain this, we must talk about a very powerful mechanism: nostalgia. Quoting all reliable Wikipedia, the word nostalgia of a Greek compound consisting of nostos, meaning homecoming, and algos, meaning pain, is a sentimentality for the past, its personalities and events. Nostalgia is one of the most used tools to sell things to us, and most of the time, we do not even realize the level of manipulation used to awaken that burning desire to buy that super cool jacket like the one worn by Kyo from King of Fighters 99, the one that you always wanted to have but you never found anyone who sold it, besides the fact that you were a poor Mexican 12-year-old boy who lived in a little town where it was more than 45 degrees Celsius and... Okay, okay, I'm sure you understand what I mean. And this is something that is very present today. And if we do some quick numbers, all those children who lived their childhood between the 90s and 2000s are at this time in a productive age. That is, they are making money, which they can use to buy all those things they could not have before, like video games. And with credit cards and digital platforms, games are more accessible than ever. If I know this, be sure the video game companies know it even better. And that's why the remake and remaster of video games is so popular right now. The biggest difference between the two is that the remaster is pure nostalgia, while the remake incorporates a modernization of it. Going back to Resident Evil, ever since the remake was announced, I was obviously interested and followed the news while trying to contain any kind of expectation or hype, which is difficult when you have the marketing guys attacking you right where it hurts. And at this point, it is worth clarifying that we cannot say everything is just about nostalgia, and the remake is also meant to bring a product with a proven formula to a new public, which evidently worked perfectly since Resident Evil 2 Remake is amongst the best releases in the history of Capcom, according to the specialized media at least, at the level of Resident Evil 7, which if you haven't played it yet, go and play it, it's a great game. Anyways, the day came when the demo one-shot was released in January 11, 2019, and then the complete game 2 weeks later, and the question was floating: did Capcom succeed in replicating the experience? The opinions reigned immediately, some complaining that the game was very easy, some complaining that the game was too hard, some praising the modernization of certain mechanics and gameplay, while others criticize that they did not follow the fixed camera angles as in the original, among other things. And this is where we see the other side of the coin, when instead of companies exploiting nostalgia, it is nostalgia exploiting our memories. Something funny happens with our minds, that the good things that we perceive at some point in time are preserved by our memory and amplified by our imagination. Do you remember how PlayStation 1 games look like? Yes? Well, that's how Leon looked in Resident Evil 2. Did you remember it with better graphics? With more detail in textures? More defined facial features? Another example of this effect, which goes even deeper, is the control of the character. Remember the mobility of Resident Evil 2, even up to Resident Evil 3? I remind you, the character always moved to where he was looking when we pressed up in the control, towards his back when we press down, and turn on his axis when we press left and right. Remember how great it was to move like this? Wasn't it great? That's right, it wasn't great. It was horrible. And if we talk about combat, the thing usually went down something like run to the far end, far from the enemy, stop, turn on your axis like a snail, aim, taking about 3 seconds to lift the weapon, shoot, fail miserably because of the angle of the camera, and then die. And cry, of course. Basically, it was like being a bot in PUBG Mobile. But apparently, nobody remembers that. We only think about the impressive and tense battles to survive, without remembering how many times we had to repeat something because the game had a layer of difficulty just in the controls. Of course, with practice you improve and there came a time when you could achieve to do everything necessary to overcome the challenges the game presented. But they are still design and technological limitations that were very linked to the time the game was made. If this was included in the remake, what do you think would happen? My calculations with Aztec precision tell me that it will work more or less well with those who wanted more of the same, but would run into a wall with anyone who was experiencing Resident Evil for the first time, and even with some fans who will have their forgotten traumas back, and not for being the Dark Souls type of difficulty in which it is appreciated and it has a purpose, but it will feel artificial, limited and obsolete, hurting sales and very possibly starting a cyber avalanche that will sink the company or leave someone without a job. This is just a very simple example of how nostalgia deforms past reality, and many companies are more than ready to plug as much money as they can out of our poor wallets abusing nostalgia. Personally, I think Capcom could have easily capitalized in a much more brutal way using nostalgia as the main weapon, and very consciously did not, and that gives me a sliver of hope for the video game industry. Unlike other examples in which greed leads to things like microtransactions everywhere or similar practices, which is worth talking in another video, and remain in a position in which they reach the perfect balance, delivering what the fans wanted, what the new public will like, and what they knew would be profitable enough without crossing the line of blatant exploitation. I want to clarify that it is not praiseworthy that they didn't abuse their audience, but it is a good example that single-player games of the highest quality without internal monetizations can be a financial success. In summary, we have to be very aware when someone tries to benefit from our nostalgia, in addition to not letting down our guard with our good memories of the past. There is nothing wrong with having good memories, just do not let it cloud your judgment when making decisions in the present. Before ending this video, I would like to mention that there is a lot of subjectivity in the psychological field, and I am far from an expert in this or in any other subject for that matters, and I do not hold the absolute truth in anything. These are just a series of thoughts that touch the subject in a very light way. The idea for this series is to initiate a healthy conversation to better understand the video game industry and perhaps just a little bit more of ourselves. So, what do you think? Is nostalgia a valid means to sell a product? Are our improved memories a defense mechanism, or is it a limitation of our mind? I would love to read your comments about it. In addition, with the following episodes we will be getting deeper into each topic, and any suggestion for future analysis is taken into account. See you in the next episode of Eagle Eye!